this thing. This here. This here. It's my new favorite lens. So here's my new favorite lens. I've been playing around with this thing for about the last 2 weeks faithfully, almost exclusively, other than for images where shorter lens might call for it. But this 200, when I first got this lens about 2 years ago, I didn't like it. In fact, I hated it. In fact, I have two zoom lenses that I do not like at all, and I actually hated this one more than they. The zoom lenses have really good quality. It's just that the focus rings on them are so easy to turn, so where I usually get a lot of missed shots that happen accidentally, not because something's wrong with the lens. It's just user issues and whatnot. But this 200, I want to talk about why I hated it. I hated this 200 because of the vignetting. The vignetting, especially wide open at f4. At first, I thought it was really bad. I thought that vignetting sucked. And that's because I was comparing it to other lenses. And not just other lenses, but other focal lengths too. I was comparing it with all the other medium format Pentax-a series 645 lenses I have, and I'm like, man, the 200 is my least favorite. All of that vignetting, plus I think like for the things that I shoot, this 200 is either too long or not long enough. So it usually puts me in a place where what I wish I could use it on more, it's a little too long for, and the other things I wish I could use it on more, it's too short for, like portraits. This 200 millimeter with this 0.7 focal reducer adapter, it gives me about 140 millimeter field of view. So it kind of feels like using a 135, except the problem with that is that you also have that added compression of the 200. So even though it has the field of view of using a 135 or something like that, it's still 200. You know what I mean? It still looks like 200. As far as like the compression effects you get, the shallow depth of field increase you have, it still feels like 200. But the only difference is it feels like 200 millimeters, but the rest of the story, it's like if I was to use like a Canon 200 millimeter, I would get more range. But then 200 on this is like someone only took a crop out of the center of, if they were to shoot it on like a full frame lens. It's almost like somebody took a picture with 200 and then just added in the rest of the story. So that's kind of what it's like. And then the vignetting on it, I started to notice vignetting in lenses a lot more a couple years ago when I started to get really involved into old manual lenses, and I started to pick up on vignetting a lot more, just trying to compare lenses and see how the colors match and see what each lens to see what each lens is good for and things like that. And vignetting just kind of became a thing to look for now. And because I saw how much vignetting was on there with the speed boost. Now, I don't know, I've never mounted any of my Pentax medium format lenses onto my camera without a speed booster. So I don't really know if that goes away. I don't know if it's only the speed booster that creates the vignetting, and if I was to put this on an actual medium format camera, that probably wouldn't be the case. I don't really know. I just know that this is my first time ever shooting bigger than full frame, and these are my first ever set of lenses that I've ever used that covered an image bigger than full frame, and this is what I got out of it, you know. So I didn't know if that was just a flaw in the lens design. There's a squirrel right here I really want a picture of, and this is what I came out here for. And because I have a manual lens in my hand, I probably can't get this shot, because doing this one-handed will not really work out too well. That's one of the downsides of using manual lenses, is that one-handed stuff, especially long range, like one-handed, is just not too well. So I'm actually going to pass up on that shot and hope to God I get a better one later. But then so I compared it to the 150, and another reason why I hated it was because the size difference versus the distance I get was completely unreasonable. It's like I only get 50 more millimeters out of the 200 compared to the 150, but the 200 is like twice the size. And then not only twice the size, the 150 is flawless. It is legitimately flawless. I don't know what else to say. I've never used a lens that clean and that pristine. I have a 300 on the way because remember when I said that this thing is just not long enough for what I want to shoot with it, like a lot of local wildlife and stuff like that. And that's pretty much what it is, just wildlife. It is my next step to a longer lens than what I have. I really want the 600, but I'd rather just do it systematically and just get the 300. It's cheaper, you know what I mean? It's a lot smaller. So I just, I kind of rather go in steps like that. Because I didn't want to be completely outrageous on the 600. Because it would have costed me more than just the price of the lens. I would have had to get a gimbal head and all this other stuff, and I just wasn't prepared for that. So I'll wait on the 600. I'll get a gimbal head for my 300, and then I'll pave out the way to be able to properly use the 600 when I can afford it. It's like $1,000, so that's kind of why I can't afford it. I don't have $1,000 to go on camera lenses when I already have a lot of them. I just ain't got a 600, man. It's the same thing I said when I got the 300. I'm like, man, but I don't have a 300. That's the same thing I said when I got the 200, and I actually hated it. Oh, crap. I'm in trouble. But no, I compared it to the 150, and the size difference between the 150 and the 200, I found that the 200 was far more bigger physically than it benefited me distance-wise over the 150. So that's kind of why I kind of didn't really cater this lens enough attention, because the 150 is like this big, bro, like dead serious. And who wouldn't rather use something like that, and that's kind of why the 200 just fell in the shadows. But as I started to I had a lot of issues. I've been off work and things like that, so I've actually been out shooting a lot of local wildlife, a lot of fall image, like a lot of fall pictures, a lot of stuff like that. I've been doing that for my stock libraries. Just while I had the time in between different moves being made, it's kind of what I went out and did. And I'm like, well, let me spend this time getting to learn this 200. So now let me tell you about why I like it. Now I like this 200, well, because it is actually, it is beneficially longer than my 150. Even though it's not that much beneficially longer, but it's so much better than cropping, because I get closer and I can still crop. I've discovered that the 200 is actually pretty freaking clean. Detail wise, sharpness wise, it's just as clean as the 150, except for the vignetting. And that's another point that I want to touch on, is that I found that the vignetting gives the images character to them. So like, even though I would much rather have a perfect lens and add my own vignetting whenever I want, but for some reason when I'm actually shooting pictures, like real pictures, not just testing out the lens, I never notice the vignetting. It never comes in to be a deal breaker. It never does. Like I never say to myself, I really would have loved that image if it wasn't for the vignetting. I never ever say that when I'm just using the lens for what it's good for, you know? I've never even cleaned it up before. Never have I ever felt compelled to clean up the vignetting. It's never been a thing for me. So I guess all my little sample charts and all of that discouraged me from wanting to like this lens. Like, I guess everything that was meant to discourage me from liking the tool is what I actually like about it, you know? The added character. Another thing that I've noticed is that the colors are extremely punchy. These colors tend to come off a lot better than a lot of modern glass, like a lot of modern high-end full-frame lenses. The colors remind me more of, like, I don't know if it's necessarily a Canon thing, because even my 51.8 STM has nice color. So I don't know, but I do know that I don't get bad color out of this. I've had some other manual lenses in my past, and they all kind of had very dull colors. They weren't too exciting. They weren't sharp at all at any aperture. But I kind of let that discourage me from investigating further in the manual lenses until I came across this adapter on YouTube. And then I'm like, okay, well, that might be my first experience with shooting medium format, or at least bigger than full frame, if no one calls it medium format. It'd be my first experience with that without actually having to buy a separate camera. And so like after I started shooting with these lenses, I realized that all of them have really great color. Like, there's not one of those lenses that I don't like the colors of. Even the zoom lenses, they have slightly more inferior color rendition, but they still pack a good punch for what they are. I mean, these are like $40 and $50 lenses, not $400 and $500 lenses. And then on top of that, a $400 and $500 lens won't get you anything good these days. I mean, probably something good enough, but nothing to, nothing to run down the street about. But these are worth running down the street about. I think I paid $80 for this 200. Most 200s will cost you at least $800. I paid $80 for this 200, and I've gotten $800 worth of use out of it, because it performs flawlessly, just like a modern 200 would, except it's a little shorter because the frame is wider. But I can do a center crop and come out with the same image, just less resolution. I don't believe these lenses like resolution that much, especially on a speed booster. I think the 30 megapixels is like the most you can probably push these to with a speed booster. If you wanted to push these to something a little bit more than that, then you might want to pull the adapter off, and just use the lens raw for what it is, and just have a real 200 field of view, what a 200 focal length. I mean, that's not a big deal at all. And remember, the lens costed you 80, not 800. So that's always a good deal, you know. The only thing you have to consider and remember is that these are all manual focus. So it is going to take some skill, but if you have the right mirrorless camera with a big and bright enough EVF, it's actually kind of like playing a game. It actually feels more like doing something than just, you know, finding a focus point, hitting the button, click. What these manual lenses tend to make me do is pay more attention to what it is I'm shooting. I pay more attention to where my depth of field is. I pay more attention to focus. I pay more attention to composition. I pay more attention to f-stop. I pay more attention to backgrounds because I have to. I have to take my time and manually focus, which means what? I have to look at the image a little bit longer, which means what? I can notice more things wrong with it, and I can do more to it within the time I'm looking at it, because I'm already sitting there looking at it, you know? And just that additional amount of time that I have to spend, it's able to get me to double think my composition. But if I didn't have to spend the additional time, I wouldn't, and I will forget things just for the sake of getting the shot at least, you know? Is this hard to use as a manual lens? Yes, it is. It is hard. It's not easy, but just because it's hard does not mean it has to stay hard. Because after you kind of get used to shooting pictures that way, you start to have eyes in the future. I don't really know how else to explain it, but it's like you can see into the future because you have to remember to premeditate every image you want to have. You have to play around with the focus to see you know, where it has to be on the scale in order to get you in the ballpark of where you really want an image. You have to play around with things like that. It make you consider aperture a lot more because it's something that you have to physically turn. And then on top of that, you get more money in your pocket too, because you don't spend 10 times the price. So that's another thing a manual lens can do for you. But with the 200 being hard, it's like after you really get used to shooting this way, this would just be how you shoot. And it'll still be the same amount of work, but it won't be something that you think is hard. It'll just be the way you shoot pictures. And when you start to hear people talk about how much of a dumb idea it is to have manual lenses, it's almost like you just be sitting there thinking like, man, these kids these days, man, and they're 5G and they're Uber. You know, you start having them kind of conversations with yourself. Like, I'm sure one of y'all know what I mean. These kids and their e-bikes and eye autofocus and dynamic range and you know what I mean. Yeah, but that's pretty much it, man. It's like I hated the 200, but now this is the only lens I use these days. And even though it's manual, even though it's old, this lens gives me a look that I cannot find currently in the stores. I cannot find this look and this character and this kind of, it's like the image has some kind of bite to it. It's like the colors have bite. You know, the colors all focus in at one particular point. You know, gradations between colors are awesome. Another thing, man, like details stand out at you even when the image is slightly out of focus. like the image has so much clarity that it still looks sharp even out of focus. And that's one of the good parts to it, is that even though I don't have perfect focus, I oftentimes have a perfect image even without perfect focus. As long as I remember to downsample and not allow anybody to really zoom in at the real 100% level, then you'll never really be able to know. Like if I gave somebody a 10 megapixel image, that'd be more than enough for what they'll ever use it for. And it'll be flawless. It just won't be 30 megapixels, you know. But other than that, I just thought I might rant about this lens. I might include some sample pictures. If I do, enjoy them. If I don't, enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you all have a good one. In Jesus' name, amen.